The metal door slid open with a sharp hiss. Cold air rushed into the dim chamber, carrying the faint smell of oil and blood. Ethan stepped inside, his boots echoing against the steel floor. His hand rested on the grip of his blaster as his eyes adjusted to the shadows. She was there, sitting in the corner, chains glinting faintly under the pale blue lights. The alien princess. Her wrists were bound to the wall, and her ankles shackled with heavy locks. Her head was tilted slightly down, silver hair cascading like liquid metal around her face. Her skin shimmered faintly under the lights, a strange glow that made her look almost unreal. She didn't move when he entered. She didn't even flinch. For a moment, Ethan wondered if she was even alive. He walked closer, the weight of his mission pressing on his shoulders. Guard the prisoner. Do not speak to her. Do not touch her. Those were his orders. She was dangerous, they said, a weapon in disguise. The daughter of the enemy's ruler, a princess whose empire had brought Earth to the edge of destruction. But as he stopped a few feet away, Ethan didn't see a weapon. He saw someone broken. Her breaths were slow, shallow, like a person who had stopped caring whether they lived or died. He set the food tray on the floor and cleared his throat. You should eat, he said, his voice firm, but not harsh. No response. Ethan waited, the silence stretching. He tried again. It's been 2 days. You'll starve. Still nothing. Her head remained bowed, her face hidden behind strands of silver hair. Frustration flickered inside him. He wasn't good at talking, especially not to aliens. He turned to leave, muttering under his breath, Fine, stay hungry. And then the ship shook. A violent tremor ripped through the chamber. Lights flickered as the floor tilted beneath his boots. Alarms blared outside the door. Ethan stumbled forward, and before he could stop himself, he reached out, catching the wall for balance. His hand brushed against something soft. Warm. Her hand. It lasted only a second. But in that second, everything changed. The princess gasped. Sharp, trembling breath that echoed louder than the alarms. Her head jerked up, and for the first time, Ethan saw her eyes. They were silver pools, glowing faintly, but behind that glow was something else, fear, desperation, and something he couldn't name. He froze, his heart pounding. He had touched her. Damn it. He snatched his hand back, stepping away like the metal had burned him. Sorry, he muttered, though he didn't know why. She was the enemy. She shouldn't matter. But then she spoke. Her voice was soft, like the crack of fragile glass. Don't let go. Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard right. Her lips parted again, shaky words slipping out. Please, don't stop. The alarms outside faded into a dull roar as Ethan stared at her, stunned. He had expected hatred, maybe a threat. Not this. Not begging. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His training screamed at him. This is a trap. She's playing you. But his gut said something else. Something raw and human. Her eyes glistened as she whispered again, her voice breaking like she hadn't spoken in days. I need. Her chains rattled as she tried to move closer, her fingers reaching out but stopping inches from him. Please. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't understand. Why would a princess, proud and cold, beg like this? What did a simple touch mean to her? Why did it sound like life or death? For the first time since the war began, Ethan felt something strange, a pull he couldn't explain. Against every rule, against every order, his hand moved on its own, reaching toward hers. But before he could touch her again, heavy footsteps thundered outside. Voices barked commands. The door hissed and began to slide open. Ethan jerked his hand back as the princess's eyes widened in panic. Her lips formed silent words, almost like a plea. Don't leave me. The door slammed open. A shadow filled the frame of Commander in black armor, eyes sharp and cold. His gaze flicked from Ethan to the chained princess and back. What the hell are you doing here? The Commander growled. Ethan straightened, forcing his voice to stay calm, checking her restraints. The Commander stepped closer, suspicion. In his glare, his voice was ice. She's not a woman, soldier. She's a weapon, remember that? Ethan nodded stiffly. The Commander stared a second longer, and turned and left. The door locking behind him, silence returned. Heavy, suffocating. Ethan glanced at her one last time. Her head had dropped again, hiding her face. But he could still hear her voice in his mind. Don't let go. He clenched his fists and turned away, walking to the door like a man heading into a storm. Asterisk. The alarms kept screaming, echoing through the steel corridors as Ethan rushed down the hall. Soldiers sprinted past him, weapons in hand, shouting orders. Red lights flashed against the walls, turning everything into a warning of danger. Enemy attack. Ethan's mind should have been on the battle, but it wasn't. It was still in that cold cell, with those silver eyes staring at him. Don't let go. He had never heard an alien beg. Never imagined a princess would whisper words like that. He gritted his teeth and forced himself forward, joining the line of soldiers at the armory. The Commander barked instructions. Enemy fleet just entered range. Protect the prisoner at all costs. If they take her, we're finished. Protect the prisoner. Right. Ethan loaded his rifle, but the thought burned in his chest. She wasn't trying to escape. She wasn't planning to fight. She just wanted a touch. Why? What did it mean? Before he could think more, the ship shook violently. Explosions boomed outside, making the metal floor vibrate. Someone cursed. They're breaking through the shields. Hold the line. The Commander roared, but then Ethan heard it, a distant sound cutting through the chaos. A voice, soft but sharp inside his head. A whisper. Please. His heart skipped. It was her. He didn't know how, but he felt it like a pull in his bones. Without waiting for orders, he turned and ran back toward the detention level. Cell door slid open with a hiss. Smoke from the vents curled through the dim chamber. The princess was still there, chained, but her head lifted slowly when she saw him. Her lips trembled. You came back. Ethan stepped inside, sealing. The door behind him. His pulse hammered in his ears. What's going on? Why did you say that? Her silver eyes locked on his, desperate and shining in the low light. Because I need you, she said, her voice breaking like fragile glass. You don't understand? Without touch, she swallowed hard, her chains clinking. I die. The words slammed into him. What? She nodded weakly. Our kind. We are born to feel through contact. Emotions, life, hope, they come through connection. Alone, we fade. Her breath hitched, and her head dropped as if the weight of truth was too much. Since the war began, I have been alone. Now, I am almost gone. Ethan stared at her, his mind spinning. It sounded insane. But looking at her, at the pale glow of her skin, the hollow shadows under her eyes, he believed it. She wasn't lying. She was dying. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If that's true, why me? Why not your people? A bitter laugh escaped her lips, broken and sad. My people? They would rather see me dead than touched by you. Her gaze lifted, fierce and soft all at once. But when you touched me, I felt it. Warmth, life. For the first time in months, I felt. Ethan's throat tightened. His training screamed at him to leave, to report this, to forget everything. But her voice, her eyes, they tore through every wall he had built. She leaned forward as far as her chains allowed, her voice a whisper of wind. Please, don't. Stop now. Ethan hesitated, his hands shaking. If anyone saw him, he'd be court-martialed, maybe shot. But could he really walk away and let her die? Slowly, against every order in his head, he reached out. His fingers brushed her soft, warm, trembling. And then he held her hand fully. The change was instant. Her breath hitched, sharp and sweet, as color seemed to return to her pale face. Her glowing eyes closed, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. Please, stay. Ethan felt something strange, something deep, electric. Her hand wasn't just warm. It pulsed like life itself was flowing through her into him. His heart pounded harder, faster, like he was falling into something he didn't understand. Then the ship shook violently again. Alarms howled louder. Ethan turned toward the door, still gripping. Her hand. We're under full attack, he muttered. I have to. Her fingers tightened around his, weak but fierce. Don't leave me. Ethan looked back, and for a moment, everything outside that room vanished. Her silver eyes, full of fear and something more, held him there. And he couldn't. Let go. Not now, Dot, but then boom. The wall shuddered. A voice boomed through the intercom. All hands, brace for boarding. Enemy troops incoming. Ethan's stomach dropped. The aliens were coming for her, and he was holding her hand when the enemy stormed the ship. Asterisk. The cell door flickered as sparks danced across the control panel. Heavy boots thundered down the corridor outside, and harsh alien voices barked commands. They were close, too close. Ethan's grip on Lyra's hand tightened as the walls shuddered. Under another blast, the red lights flickered, casting their faces in a dim, blood-colored glow. He stared at her, at those glowing silver eyes full of fear, and knew the truth. If they took her, he'd never see her again. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling like the air before a storm. If they find me, I will die. Not by their hands, but by his. Her gaze darkened with pain. My father. Ethan blinked. Your father? Why? Her chains rattled as she leaned forward. Because I failed him, and because I let you touch me. Her breath hitched as her eyes locked on his. In my world, your touch means a bond, a promise that cannot be broken. His heart slammed against his ribs. A bond? His voice cracked with disbelief. I just held your hand. To you, maybe, she whispered. But to my kind, it means you are mine, and I am yours. The words hit him like a thunderclap. Heat crawled up his spine, mingling with the cold dread of the pounding footsteps outside. He didn't have time to process it, not now. The cell door sparked again. A loud metallic crack tore through the room as the lock began to fail. Lyra's voice was sharp and low. Ethan, choose. If you leave me now, they will take me, and I will never come back. Something inside him snapped. Orders, rules, the weight of his oath, they all shattered in that moment. He couldn't let her go. Not to her enemies, not to her father, not to anyone. He reached for his belt, pulling out a small plasma cutter. The beam hissed as it touched the metal restraints. Sparks flew, biting into his gloves. The chain snapped, clattering to the floor. He moved to the other wrist, cutting through as the door behind them groaned louder. Lyra flinched as the final lock broke. Her arms fell free, trembling from weeks of restraint. Ethan caught her before she collapsed, pulling her close. Her body was lighter than he expected, fragile, but warm, so warm. Can you run? He asked, breathless. She looked at him, her lips trembling into the faintest smile. "Not without you." The door exploded inward. 4 alien soldiers stormed inside, armor gleaming, weapons raised. Ethan spun, firing his rifle in a rapid burst. 2 went down in a blaze of plasma fire, their bodies crushing against the walls. The others lunged forward, blades flashing. "Stay behind me," he shouted, kicking the steel table toward them. It slammed into one soldier, knocking him back. The other swung wide, his blade slicing air where Ethan's head had been a second before. Ethan fired again, one shot, clean through the helmet. The soldier fell. Silence. Smoke curled from the barrels of Ethan's rifle. His chest heaved as he turned back to Lyra. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but something else. Awe, and something deeper. "You killed them," she whispered, breathless. "For me." Ethan shook his head, grabbing her hand again. "No time for this. We need to move." He pulled her toward the corridor. The ship trembled as another blast ripped through the hull. Voices shouted in the distance, more soldiers coming. Ethan checked the map on his wrist display. The escape pods were 2 decks down. They ran, boots pounding against metal, alarms howling like wolves in the dark. Lyra stumbled once, her legs still weak, and Ethan caught her without slowing, lifting her into his arms. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her breath warm against his skin. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with something he couldn't name. "Why would you do this for me?" He didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know. All he knew was that leaving her behind was never an option. Not anymore. They reached the lift, but the panel was dead destroyed by the attack. Ethan cursed under his breath. "Damn it. We'll have to take the maintenance shafts." As he pried open the metal grate, Lyra spoke again, her voice soft, but cutting through the chaos. "You broke my chains, Ethan. Do you know what that means?" He glanced at her. Sweat clung to his brow, his heart still racing. "That you're free?" Her silver eyes burned into his. "No, it means I am yours now." The words froze him for half a heartbeat. And in that half a heartbeat, the world around him seemed to shift like nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk. The maintenance shaft shuddered as Ethan pulled himself and Lyra upward. Metal creaked around them like the ship itself was screaming. Flames roared in the distance, and smoke poured through vents. The alarms had changed. They weren't just warnings anymore. They were death bells. "Hold on to me," Ethan shouted over the noise. Lyra clung to him, her arms tight around his neck. Her silver hair brushed against his cheek, warm and soft despite the chaos. The ship lurched violently. Ethan lost his grip for a heartbeat and slammed his boot against the rung to steady them. Sparks rained from a ruptured conduit above, sizzling. Against the walls, a voice crackled over the comm system, sharp and panicked. "All units core breach imminent." "Abandon ship, repeat, abandon ship." Ethan's gut twisted. Core breach. They had minutes before the entire vessel turned into a ball of fire. He gritted his teeth and climbed faster, his muscles burning. Lyra's breath trembled against his ear. "Ethan?" Her voice was soft, almost drowned by the alarms. "You could leave me. Save yourself." He almost laughed at the insanity of it. "Not happening." "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If you stay with me, you will die." He pulled himself onto the upper deck and rolled into the corridor, dragging her up after him. Smoke curled along the ceiling like black ghosts. "Then we die together," he said, his jaw hard as steel. Lyra froze, staring at him with wide eyes, like no one had ever spoken those words to her before. Something inside her shattered, and her fingers tightened around his arm like she would never let go. They ran. The escape pod bay was close, but the corridors were chaos. Sparks exploded from broken panels. Flames licked the walls. And worse, the sound of boots behind them. Enemy soldiers closing in. Ethan fired over his shoulder as they ran, plasma bolts lighting the smoke-filled hall. 2 alien troops fell, their armor cracking under the blasts, but more voices shouted in the distance. He skidded to a stop at a sealed blast door. The panel was dead, burned out from the last hit. Damn it, he hissed, slamming his fist against the metal. Lyra stepped forward, pressing her glowing hand against the surface. For a second, Ethan thought she was panicking. Then the metal flickered and the lock released with a hiss. He stared at her, stunned. "How did you—" "Later," she said, grabbing his hand. "Move!" The blast door slid open, and they stumbled into the escape pod bay. Rows of pods lined the chamber, half of them already gone. The floor trembled under their boots as the ship groaned like a dying beast. Ethan sprinted to the nearest pod and slammed his hand on the panel. The hatch hissed open. He turned to Lyra, his voice sharp with urgency. "Get in." She hesitated, her silver eyes shimmering with something more than fear. "You'll come with me?" "Until the end," he said without blinking. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but the ship lurched again, throwing them both against the wall. Metal screamed. The lights died for a split second, plunging them into blackness. Then emergency glow strips flickered on, painting the room in blood-red light. Ethan shoved her inside the pod and climbed in after her. The hatch sealed with a heavy thud, cutting off the sound of the burning ship. For a moment, there was silence, just the ragged breathing, close and raw. He dropped into the pilot's seat and slammed the controls. The pod vibrated as clamps released. Outside, the ship shook so violently, it felt like the world was tearing apart. Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice sharp. "Ethan, look at me." He turned, his hands trembling over the controls. Her eyes burned like molten silver, filled with fear and something stronger. "If this pod fails," she whispered, "I want you to know. When you touched me, I felt alive again." His throat closed. No words came. So instead, he reached for her hand, squeezing it tight. "We're not dying today." The pod launched with a roar. The G-force slammed them back into their seats as the pod shot into the black void of space. The dying warship exploded behind them, a blinding star of fire swallowing metal and screams. The shockwave hit the pod, like a hammer, spinning it through the emptiness. Ethan gritted his teeth, fighting the controls, his hands slick with sweat. Alarms screamed inside the pod. Systems were failing. Oxygen warnings flashed red. "Hold on," he yelled, trying to stabilize the spin. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos, soft and unshaken. "If we die now, at least I'm with you. Stop talking like that." He snapped, forcing the pod to level out. Finally, with a violent jolt, the spin slowed. Silence settled in cold, empty, endless. Stars stretched out around them like shattered glass. Ethan slumped back, chest heaving. "We're clear," he whispered. "For now." Lyra leaned against him, her breath warm on his neck. "You saved me, Ethan, against everything." He didn't answer. He just held her hand tighter, because deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The pod drifted through the dark ocean of space, stars stretching like frozen sparks beyond the viewport. Inside, silence pressed heavy against their ears, broken only by the soft hum of failing systems. Ethan stared at the blinking console. The warning glowed red. Oxygen. 12 hours remaining. His jaw tightened. 12 hours, maybe less. No weapons. No backup. Just a pod floating between enemy and friendly space. He rubbed his face, trying to think. Beside him, Lyra shifted slowly, her chains gone but her body still weak. Her silver hair caught the faint glow of the emergency lights, shimmering like liquid moonlight. She turned her head and whispered, "How bad is it?" Ethan glanced at her, forcing his voice steady. "We've got 12 hours of air." Her lips parted, but she didn't flinch. She didn't panic. Instead, she gave a soft nod and murmured, "That's more than I thought." He frowned. "You expected worse?" Her eyes lowered, sadness pooling like deep water. "When they chained me, I thought I'd never see the stars again." 12 hours of freedom. She let out a fragile laugh that cracked like broken glass. "It feels like a gift." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. The alarms in his head, the orders, the rules, they all felt far away now. What mattered was right here, the woman who had gone from enemy to something he didn't have words for. "Lyra." His voice was low, careful. "Back in the cell, you said something about my touch, about a bond." Her breath caught. Slowly, she met his eyes. "Yes. What did you mean?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "Among my people, touch is sacred. When you touched me, it wasn't simple. It wasn't nothing. It is a vow, a thread of life between two souls. Once made, it cannot break." Ethan's chest tightened. "And if it breaks?" Her silver gaze shimmered, tears pooling like stars. "One of us dies inside, sometimes both." Silence filled the pod, heavy as gravity. Ethan swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He hadn't chosen this, hadn't understood it, but the thought of breaking that thread, of letting her go, felt like ripping something out of his own chest. Finally, he said softly, "So, what does that make me to you?" Her voice trembled like starlight on water. "It makes you everything." The word struck deep, deeper than anything he had ever felt. Ethan didn't move for a moment, afraid. The sound of his own breath would break the fragile truth hanging between them. Then the pod shuddered, a metallic groan vibrating through the walls. Systems flickered. A slow alarm beeped, sharp and cold. Power, 30% remaining. Ethan cursed under his breath, slamming the panel with his fist. "Come on, hold together." Lyra reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his knuckles. Warm, steady. It was like her touch was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "Ethan?" He looked at her. Her voice softened, heavy with something more than fear. "If we don't make it, I need you to know something." "What?" His voice cracked. She drew in a shaky breath. "When you touched me, you gave me life again. I was fading, cold, empty. And then you came. You gave me more than air, more than hope. You gave me a reason to fight." Ethan's throat burned. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck like stone in his chest. So instead, he did the only thing that felt real. He reached out and took her hand, fully, firmly. Their fingers locked like they were carved from the same piece of fate. Her breath hitched, her eyes closing as a single tear slid down her cheek. "Don't let go," she whispered. "Never," he said, and he meant it. With every drop of blood in his body, he meant it. For a moment, the war, the rules, the universe, they all faded. There was only this, two souls in the dark, holding on like their lives were made of each other. Then the console screamed again, louder, sharper. Proximity alert. Unknown vessel approaching. Ethan's head snapped toward the viewport. A shape was cutting through the stars. A warship, sleek and black, its lights glowing like the eyes of a predator. Lyra's breath froze. "That's not human," she whispered, fear trembling in her voice. "It's my father's fleet." Ethan gripped her hand tighter, his heart slamming like a war drum. "Then we fight." The warship filled the viewport like a black shadow swallowing the stars. Its hull glowed with alien markings, sharp and elegant like blades of light. A cold voice crackled over the pod speakers, speaking in a tongue Ethan didn't know, but Lyra understood. Her face turned pale, her silver eyes wide with dread. "It's him," she whispered. "My father." Ethan's gut tightened. "Your father?" "As in, the Emperor," she said, her voice barely a breath. "He commands the fleet." The pod jolted as a tractor beam locked on. The console flashed. Override engaged, system control lost. Ethan slammed his fist against the panel, but it was useless. The pod shuddered as it was pulled toward the massive ship, its glowing hangar doors opening like the jaws of a beast. "Lyra," Ethan said, grabbing her shoulders, "listen to me. When we land, I'll fight. I'll get you out." Her eyes glistened with tears as she shook her head. "No, you don't understand." Her voice cracked, desperate. "If they take me, they will kill you before you take your first step. You touched me. That alone is enough." Ethan clenched his teeth. "Then they'll have to kill me trying." She gripped his hand, her fingers trembling but fierce. "There's only one way they won't. Only one way to make them see you. Not as a threat, but as—" Her voice faltered, her cheeks flushing with something beyond fear. "As mine." Ethan stared at her, confusion and heat colliding in his chest. "As yours? What does that mean?" Her silver eyes locked on his, blazing like molten light. "Claim me," she whispered. "Now." He blinked. "Claim you?" "Lyra, what in—" "My culture," she said, her voice shaking but steady with truth. "A claim is sacred. It means no one, not even the Emperor, can break our bond. They will not kill you, because you will be my chosen." Ethan's breath caught. "And if I don't?" Her lips trembled, her voice cracking like glass. "Then they will rip you from me. And I will watch you die." The pod thudded as it docked inside the alien hangar. Metal clamps sealed around it. Outside, the sound of boots and weapons echoed like thunder. Ethan's heart pounded, every second a blade against his throat. Claim her? What did that even mean? Was it words? A ritual? A kiss? His mind screamed questions, but her eyes held answers that didn't need words. "Tell me what to do," he said, his voice low, raw. Her breath shook as she reached for his hand, pressing it against her chest where her heart beat fast, frantic. "Say the vow. Repeat after me." The pod's hatch hissed open with a cloud of steam. Heavy footsteps approached. Shadows loomed beyond the door. Lyra's lips brushed his ear as she whispered the words. "By the stars, by the blood, by the bond between souls, I claim you as mine." Ethan's pulse thundered as he spoke, his voice firm, unbreaking. "By the stars, by the blood, by the bond between souls, I claim you as mine." The last word left his lips just as the light flared between their joined hands, a brilliant silver blaze, wrapping their fingers in a burning thread of energy. Lyra gasped, her body trembling as the mark formed on her skin. A glowing sigil etched like fire. Ethan felt it too, a searing heat, deep and primal, carving into his soul. For a second, the universe tilted. He could feel her heartbeat inside his own chest. Then the light faded, leaving only the glowing mark on their hands, a sign that no one could deny. The hatch hissed fully open. Figures in black armor stormed in, weapons drawn. Behind them, a towering figure stepped forward, a man in obsidian robes, his presence like gravity itself. The Emperor dot his eyes silver like Lyra's, but cold as stone fixed on Ethan. The air thickened with silent rage. Soldiers raised their weapons, but the Emperor lifted a hand, stopping them. He stepped closer, his voice low, sharp as a blade. "Human," the word dripped with venom. "Do you know what you have done?" Ethan stood his ground, his mark still glowing on his hand. "Yes," he said, his voice steady as steel. "I claimed her." Gasps rippled through the soldiers. The Emperor's gaze burned with fury, and something darker, something like fear. Lyra moved to Ethan's side, her chin high, her voice clear. He is my chosen. Harm him, and you dishonor the throne. The Emperor's jaw tightened. For a long, heavy silence, he stared at them both. Then, slowly, his lips curved not in a smile, but in a promise of war. "Then prove it," he said, his voice like thunder rolling across a dead sky. "Prove this bond, or die together." The throne chamber was a cathedral of metal and light. High arched walls gleamed like silver ice, and the air hummed with a low, pulsing energy. Ethan stood in the center of the vast hall, surrounded by alien soldiers whose eyes burned with hate. His hands were bound behind his back, not with chains, but with shimmering energy bands that bit into his skin. Across from him, Lyra knelt, her head bowed but her voice steady. "Father," she said, the word like steel wrapped in silk. "The bond is sealed. You cannot break it." The Emperor rose from his throne, his black robes flowing like liquid shadow. His eyes were fire-cold, merciless fire. "You speak of law," he said, his voice a blade slicing through the silence. "But law bends to the throne. If this bond is true, it will endure the trial." Ethan clenched his fists against the burning restraints. "What trial?" The Emperor's gaze fell on him, and Ethan felt the weight of an entire empire pressing down on his chest. "The trial of souls," the Emperor said. "A test older than the stars. If your bond is real, it will hold against pain, fear, and death." A platform rose from the floor between them, glowing with runes that burned like fire. Lyra's breath caught. "Father, no! Silence!" The Emperor roared, the walls trembling with his fury. "If this human has stolen what belongs to my blood, let him prove his claim, or die screaming." The energy bands snapped away, releasing Ethan. He staggered forward, his muscles tense, his heart pounding like war drums. The platform blazed, brighter as the runes pulsed with life. Heat rolled off it, thick and suffocating. Lyra's voice shook as she whispered to Ethan, "This will hurt. More than anything you've ever felt. But if you let go of me, if you break, I lose everything." Ethan turned to her, his jaw set like stone. "I'm not letting go." The Emperor raised his hand. The runes flared, and a blinding light exploded. Around them, Ethan felt himself wrenched into darkness, a void that swallowed sound, light, and breath. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the pain came not. It was fire under his skin, lightning in his bones, ice in his blood, all at once. He dropped to his knees, choking on a scream. The void echoed with whispers, cruel and cold. "You are weak. You are human. Let go." Through the agony, a voice cut through a voice like starlight in a storm. "Ethan." Lyra's voice, close, warm, alive. "Don't listen. Hold on to me." He forced his eyes open. She was there, her silver hair glowing, her hand reaching for his. But between them was a wall of fire, roaring like a living beast. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to save himself. He took a step, and the fire burned through his veins like molten steel. His vision blurred, his knees buckled. "I can't." The words almost escaped his lips. Then he saw her eyes, silver, pools bright with tears, burning with hope. Not a princess, not an alien, just someone who had trusted him with everything. And in that moment, something deep and fierce ignited in him. He roared against the pain and lunged forward, forcing his body through the fire. His skin felt like it was peeling away, his muscles tearing, but he didn't stop. Inch by inch, step by step, until his hand broke through the flames and clasped hers. The instant their fingers locked, the void shattered dot light exploded, blinding and pure. The fire vanished. The whispers died. And Ethan was on his knees, gasping for air, his body trembling but alive. Beside him, Lyra knelt too, her hand still gripping his like a lifeline. Between them, the bond mark flared brighter than ever, glowing with a power that filled the chamber like the heartbeat of a star. When the light faded, they stood together, side by side. The Emperor stared down at them, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with rage and something else. Fear. "The bond is true," one of the priests whispered, bowing low. "It cannot be broken." Silence fell like a blade. Then the Emperor spoke, his voice cold as space. "So be it. You live for now. But hear me, human, if you betray her, not even your gods will save you." Ethan met his burning gaze without flinching. "I won't." Lyra stepped forward, her chin high, her fingers lacing with Ethan's. Her voice rang clear, stronger than ever. "He is mine, and I am his, by law, by bond, by soul." Gasps rippled through the hall. Soldiers lowered their weapons, bound. By custom they could not break. The Emperor turned away sharply, his robes swirling like storm clouds. "Take them to the honored chambers," he ordered. "Prepare the Union rites." Ethan blinked. "Union rites?" He muttered under his breath. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile, her cheeks flushing like dawn. "You claimed me, Ethan," she whispered softly, her fingers tightening around his. "Now you keep me." For the first time since the war began, Ethan let out a shaky laugh, half disbelief, half something deeper. He squeezed her hand and whispered back, "Guess I'm not letting go any time soon." *The End.